welcome to Healing Horizons, where soul meets real world transformation. I'm your host, Saima. Dr. Dane Howell has spent over 4 decades challenging the way we think about medicine, from functional medicine roots to pioneering neurocranial restructuring and developing howling. His work blends science, intuition, and holistic care. But perhaps his most provocative stance is this: healing should never be confused with selling treatments. And tonight, we dig into the heart of what real healing is and why the medical world's business model might be holding it back. So, Dr. Dean, welcome to the show.
Thank you. How are you today?
You're warmly welcome. I'm completely fine. So, Dr. Dean, you have seen both sides, the true healer's path and the business side of medicine. So, I'm really curious to know that where do they most often clash?
Well, generally, it the big differences are you trying to, as the practitioner, are you trying to deal with the symptoms that are bothering people, where their pains are, the different kinds of chemical disruptions? Are you trying to deal with that, or do you want to deal with the cause behind those symptoms, or even better yet, the cause behind the cause of those those various symptoms? So one is the path of healing, and the other is the path of what they call allopathy, which means symptom treatment medicine.
Mm-hmm. So, like, I really wanted to know that do you think it's, possible for them to ever truly align?
Well, there are times if you go to the hospital with a broken leg and they decide that you need to work with a surgeon, then that will be not only dealing with your symptoms, the pain of the broken leg, but it will also deal with the cause because the surgeon will mend the broken leg so that it can heal. So that's
Mm-hmm.
at those times, I think everyone agrees that that is entirely appropriate behavior. But instead, if let's say you have frequent headaches, and then you find that taking uh, aspirin, acetylsalicylic acid, or Tylenol, acetaminophen, or other non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, if you're dependent on those just to function, then those medicines are not treating the cause. So when medical doctors prescribe pain pills, they are not treating cause.
Mm-hmm. That's such a thoughtful perspective, Dean, and I can see how your experiences have shaped the way you view that balance.
Well, yes, and if you think about it from the practitioner's standpoint, if someone comes in and tells you about the pain and you say, you can just take these pills and leave me alone, um,
Mm-hmm.
at that point, you know that that practitioner doesn't really care. So for me, when I started in practice in 1982, uh, when people came in and they complained about their pains and how other people had failed to help them, and that medications at best only address their symptoms temporarily, for many doctors, it was just to say, isn't life terrible? And there's nothing we can do about it. But for me, it was a spur to learn more and then eventually to develop more things because there were no techniques out there that were working well at addressing cause for many different kinds of conditions. See, my original degree is as a naturopathic doctor, and our pledge, and it brought me to tears when I graduated from medical school, it was that
Mm-hmm.
we treat the cause of what these problems were instead of just dealing with these annoying or terrible symptoms.
Yes, I see. Your answer really captures both the hope and the realism in that journey.
Yes.
How do you define healing beyond just relieving symptoms?
Well, relieving symptoms is definitely not healing. Healing assumes that a condition will get better and that the condition will no longer be there. So, what we have found is that although you can mend a broken leg and you can have a wound heal, for most conditions that are afflicting people as they get older, the chronic conditions like heart disease or uh, bad veins or senility, these kind of problems are not addressable with medications that temporarily make them go away. Oh, yes, you can take pills for blood pressure and you can take medicines that make your heart beat in a steady rhythm, but the heart continues getting worse. If you want to heal the heart, for instance, or blood vessels or the brain, at that point, you need to get the body to start fixing itself. So we decide as therapists how we can help a person's condition get better, but God is how we heal. And what I've spent years investigating is how to heal. And what I've found out is that it revolves around getting the body into a state where it self generates, where it self heals. So when you were growing up, you didn't have to think about how to grow taller. It happened automatically. It was in your body's field. You were creating those things. And yet now we'll take vitamin C or minerals or get plastic surgery, and those problems can't be addressing the underlying situations, and the body doesn't go to a point where it self heals. So what I've had to do instead is to deal with the body's toxicities. So the exposure we get to uh, uh, agricultural, industrial chemicals and heavy metal exposures, and then the chronic infections, because most of us have a lot of different bacteria and fungi and mold even living in our bodies, parasites, which remember that we share our body with the parasites. We're the host and they control us. So our very cravings for a lot of carbohydrate foods is actually triggered by the parasitic organisms that live inside us because they're hungry for carbs. It turns out that we hosts only need protein and fat, and the carbohydrates are the things that our long ago ancestors who lived in caves and huts, they didn't farm. They went out to capture animals and occasionally pick berries or something, but what they were doing instead was that their bodies they were able to ignore the need for the carbohydrates. And so this is why, according to paleontologists, that people in the olden days of the cavemen and so forth, they never died of heart disease. They never died of cancer. They never died of neurologic disease because their lifestyle did not promote those kinds of things from being strong. So for us, once we start dealing with these toxins, once we start dealing with the parasites, bacteria, and et cetera, and once we start dealing with the chronic injuries that are left over from our life, once we start dealing with those kind of conditions, and we can actually change those fundamental underlying problems, once we do that, the body self heals. So, for
Mhm.
example, if you go to my websites, you can see pictures of me in my past when I was extremely fat. So, for example, I did YouTube videos in 2014 where I'm over 450 pounds. That is not healthy, even though at that
Mm-hmm.
time I was going to the gym 3 times a week and I could walk many miles carrying bags and packs and golf clubs and so forth. But despite that, I was extremely heavy. No high blood pressure, no high cholesterol. I finally decided to start trying to control my eating, and I found out that I would sleepwalk and start eating. And yet, when I would wake up, I wasn't dreaming about food. I was dreaming about unrelated topics, and I was going through my house from my bedroom all the way to the refrigerator in the kitchen in an entirely dark house, and yet, even though there was furniture and, well, in some places boxes or piles of laundry, I was able to navigate through all of those things in the entire dark, get to the kitchen, open the refrigerator, eating food. I had food in both hands and food in my mouth, and the lights woke me up. And since I wasn't thinking about food, and then yet here I was eating, I realized that it was because I'm the host, and the parasites whom I share my brain with were able to see those obstructions in the darkened house better than I could. I went up to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror and I said, "Worms, I know you're in there and I'm going to kill you." And
Mm-hmm.
I said that, I got goosebumps on my skin. The hair on my arms stood up on end, and I got cold shivers because I scared the worms who were in control because they knew how determined I was. Once I started dealing with those problems, my hair that was all gray and white when I was 60, about, well, 5 or more years later, started growing back in brown.
Mm-hmm.
Healing instead of me dealing with symptoms.
Mm-hmm. The way you have described it really paints a fuller picture of what it means to be well. And your definition surely makes it feel alive and human, not clinical. And that's such an important reframe in the way we think about health.
Well, when you're healthy, there is no reason that you should be aging. What we're
Mm-hmm.
finding, when we get people to actually heal, their apparent age, their, what should you say, the biological age, not the chronologic age. Once you start healing, your apparent biological age reverses and you start getting younger. That was why my hair grew back in proper color. That was why my skin, the age spots on my hands started fading because my body was self healing. I had varicose veins, and those are gradually being replaced with new veins that don't have that terrible tendency to, lead out onto the skin. Uh, those problems are going away because my body's healing. Similarly, any things that are associated with aging and being chronic that you might have would reverse once we get you to a point where your body wants to heal.
That completely makes sense. Thing. So, can someone feel better but still not be healed?
Oh, absolutely. That's what uh, all of the medical services of the world, almost all of them, over 99%, are based just on that. And many people are satisfied with their situation, and they would rather not go through all the work um, that is required in order to trigger healing. It's much more convenient to leave your life the way that it is now, continue your current habits, and to take a pill or to get a short-term surgery or other or short-term solution with therapies. That's what it's about. People that have chronic pain see massage therapists, physical therapists, chiropractors, osteopaths for treatments that give them relief, which is good, but it doesn't last. which is bad for the patient and good for the therapist because this is how they make a living, is having you come back every week or two or every month or every time you start to hurt. But that is not about healing.
Yes, that makes sense. And that's really an eye-opening way to frame it. It really highlights the difference between temporary relief and true lasting healing. And the way you have explained it makes me think, about how important it is to look beneath the surface, because if we only chase the feeling of better, we might miss the opportunity for full genuine recovery. And I must say, Dean, that your answer really underlines why that distinction matters so much in both personal health and in the way we approach caring for others.
Well, yes, thank you.
So, now, neurocranial restructuring and howling are unique approaches. So, how do they address what traditional methods miss?
Well, the neurocranial restructuring was my development in how to move the head bones into a better, more symmetrical alignment in a way that would be lasting. And so it was based, we used a device which is very simple. It's a small balloon shaped like a finger attached to an old fashioned blood pressure cuff inflating bulb. And then we slide it through the nose into the top of the throat because most of our head injuries are when we get hit from the outside and our bones get pushed in and then they're stuck there. We can't use suction cups or something to straighten the nose or pull the cheekbones out or get that dent out of your head. Or if you had difficulty with your birth and your head came out with sort of a point, there's how do we resolve that situation so that the bones get better aligned? So back in the 1930s, and we're not even sure who first started this, someone used a balloon that they would slide through the nostril into the top of the throat and inflate it for a second or two, and then use that similar to using a hammer to pound out the dents in an old fashioned metal car. So when we used to have a crumpled fender, we would take it to a body man, they called him, and he would take a rubber mallet or hammer and pound the dents out, and then he would repaint. Well, so the idea in the 1930s was since somebody had fallen and hit their head and there was a dent, we'll use balloons up the nose to push on the bone structure to push the dents back out. Well, it turned out that as you release different joints within the skull, the chronic tension in the connective tissues inside the bones and outside the brain, they're always pushing, kind of like springs waiting to go into action. So when we go through with our hands and using the small balloons and we open the joints, then the connective tissue is freed up and it's able to keep moving. We call that unwinding, but it's not truly wound. But so then things will shift. And what clinically has been shown many times is that if our stability as we stand, in other words, how stable we are when we're standing on our 2 feet, as long as that is improving after each treatment, then the body has no reason to revert back to the pattern that we had before. And what I found out myself is that when I was doing spinal work and massage work and things of the sorts that I was trained in medical school, when I used those techniques on people, the treatments, they would feel very good afterwards, have improved range of motion, decreased pain. But a week or two later, they would come back and say, that was a really good treatment. Would you do that again?
Mm-hmm.
And that showed that I'd failed at a certain level because I wasn't treating the cause. So I developed the neurocranial restructuring to work with the skull alignment. And then because that was insufficient and I started needing to work more on the spine and pelvis, I started discovering that after injuries, people the people's muscles would sort of get glued to adjacent bones. So, for instance, if the rib cage, when you breathe, your rib cage should move like an old time accordion. It should, and all the rib bones should have independent movement and they should expand when you're inhaling and they should all come back together when you're exhaling. But that's rare. Most everyone has those bones behaving as if they were stuck together because of the chronic spasms in all those muscles. So when those muscles spasm, there it leads to a hard, firm kind of crust on the muscles. So they don't
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, but they don't move either. So with howling, we go in very deeply, right along those bone margins, and start melting the scars in the muscles so that the muscles can return to their normal function. And then, for example, with the rib cage, it will start moving like an accordion when people breathe. So, what we found is that combining the NCR work, the neurocranial restructuring, with the howling, whether it be on the rib cage or the hands or the shoulder and armpit or the feet, or the breast of the pelvis, when we started dealing with those things, we got impressive long term changes because a new injury was required in order to cause the body to revert back to those old patterns. So when we do the howling, it truly is a form of healing, which is probably why it isn't being done so much. It takes a lot of time. It's very painful for the patient as well as the practitioner, but it gives you the benefit of having these long term benefits.
Mm-hmm. That's really intriguing, Dean, like especially the part about using a device to do it. It's not something we hear about in most traditional settings. It makes me wonder about how many people might be missing out on those kinds of results simply because they haven't been exposed to these methods. Again, the way you describe it really shows that when used in the right hands, it can open up completely different possibilities for healing.
That's true. And the problem is that it's bad for business. So back to our original point is that, which is that most therapists are specialists in chiropractic or osteopathy or homeopathy or nutrition, and they're going to sell you those kind of services, but rarely will those services be something that will create a lasting change because you won't get the body to the point where it will self heal.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, can intuition be cultivated in other practitioners as well?
Oh, of course. Intuition is how we decide where to work. And we do with intuition. And then we also, of course, we have to use nutrition, but nutrition will be, in this case, uh, initially a focus on avoiding carbohydrates. And then, secondly, it will be to support the organs for detoxification. And then finally, to start removing the heavy metals, correcting the residues of old infections, antibiotics, vaccines. Um, and so we use guided intuition to decide which things are most important, and then we use nutritional style supplementation to start correcting these underlying problems. So that means that we're not going to use vitamin C very often because
Mm-hmm.
it's a very crucial element. If your immune system is having problems so that you're thinking of taking vitamin C and zinc, what you need to do is to help your immune system the most is to avoid carbohydrates because every time you start secreting insulin, your immune system, especially the white blood cells, stop being as active. So if you are eating food 6 times a day, and each time it includes 100 calories, 20 grams of carbohydrates, that means your immune system, because it's inactivated for 6 hours each time you secrete insulin, may only work in the middle of the night until you wake up in the morning. The other, let's say 20 hours a day, you're not going to, your immune system isn't going to work well, and you're going to catch colds and flus, all kinds of stuff that those of us that are eating better never have.
Hmm. I love, Dean, that how you've unpacked that. It's encouraging to think of it not just as a rare gift, but as something that can be nurtured and strengthened over time.
Yes. And that's why you want to change things so that you can heal.
Yes. Dr. Howell, your perspective challenges us to rethink the entire structure of healthcare, to move from selling fixes to facilitating true lasting transformation. So, listeners, if his words resonate, let them spark a deeper question. Am I being treated or am I truly being healed? Because the difference could change everything.